Israel's foreign minister says international pressure is growing for a ceasefire in Gaza. And major protests have been taking place over the weekend. The police in London now say it was 300,000 people that took part in a pro-Palestinian march. Some of the signs there read "Free Palestine" and "Stop the Massacre." A different sort of demonstration in Paris on Sunday. 100,000 people or so are believed to have joined a march against anti-Semitism. Shlomo Dovrat is a prominent Israeli tech entrepreneur. He appeared on our show back in March when we were talking about the judicial reforms in Israel, and he criticised the Prime Minister Netanyahu's reforms. After October the 7th attack, Dovrat called Israel strong, vibrant and united. And he said his country was on the moral and right side of history. Shlomo Dovrat joins me now from Israel. Good evening to you, sir. I'm grateful for your time. Thank you for taking the time. Before we get into the ability of Israel to, if you like, in an economic sense, we have to start with the events of the moment. And of course, I guess the issue is how you and others in Israel feel when you hear that Palestinians doctors saying that premature babies are dying in hospital because the hospitals no longer have fuel and are no longer able to provide life support.
So, Richard, obviously, what is happening in Gaza is heartbreaking. It's when you can't ignore pictures of babies dying or children dead, and it's heartbreaking for everybody. But in Israel, we have just experienced the worst day in our history, probably the worst day in the history of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. On October 7th, 1,400 Israelis were slaughtered, murdered, raped, babies were burnt. I don't know if you saw any of the videos or any of the pictures, but it is unbearable atrocities. 3,000 militias or terrorists or whatever the BBC wants to call them now have crossed the border into Israel. We had a ceasefire, by the way, on October 6th, and they went into villages, they went into military camps, and they literally slaughtered 1,400 of our people. And they also took hostage 240 people, including 38 children. Right. So, yes, it is heartbreaking for us, but it is also something that Israel has no choice but to go. And I think that, with all the differences that Israel had prior to this October 7th, Israel is now very united, and 99%, including Israeli Arabs, who suffered huge losses as well, are united that we can no longer live with Hamas, a terrorist organization whose only goal is to eliminate the Jewish people and to kill everybody. By the way, you mentioned the demonstration in London. When those Muslim demonstrator or British demonstrator are calling for free Palestine from the river to the sea, do they really understand what they're saying? What they're really saying is no Jews between the river and the sea. Mean what? We are supposed to be all dead and just do nothing about it? So I think with all the political disputes we had before, we are very determined that Hamas needs to be eliminated.
Okay, I hear what you say, and you used the phrase there, you had no choice, or Israel had no choice, bearing in mind. I guess there will be an argument that says, all right, even if there are Hamas in that hospital, under that hospital, does that still justify what's being done to the patients within?
So I'm not part of the military operation, obviously, but to the best of my knowledge, Israel has not entered any hospital which has patients. On the other hand, Israel has been shot at, including rockets. By the way, a few days ago, a house just 3 streets from me was destroyed by a rocket that may have been shot from one of the hospitals in Gaza. We are being attacked. Israel on October 7th has been attacked. We are defending ourselves. If the Hamas is choosing kids and hospitals and mosques and school as a way to shield themselves from the Israeli going after them, then we have no choice. Israel, as far as I know, has not entered a single hospital, has allowed evacuation of all the patients, and to the best of my knowledge, except the Shifa hospital, all the other hospitals are now evicted, and in the Shifa hospital, there are only a few hundreds left after there were 50,000. So Israel is not a barbarian country. Unlike Hamas, we are a liberal democratic country who upholds the moral justice And I believe that Israel is doing all the necessary precaution to try and minimize those casualties. But as you said yourself, Richard, war is nasty. And at this point, we have a vicious enemy, and there is no choice. We abide by international laws. We consider every attack and every action. I used to be a military officer. I know how it works. I think Israel is a very proud democracy who really is abiding by all international war laws.
Can I just, all right, so if we move this forward, I mean, is there a risk here that, the overwhelming force that Israel can bring to bear suggests and probably means that, I mean, the country will prevail in its armed struggle, if you will, but you risk sort of winning the war and losing the peace, because now turning to your sort of role as an entrepreneur and as understanding the mechanisms of the Israeli economy, what happens if Israel becomes a pariah state where people don't want to invest?
I don't think there is any risk of that, because I think nobody in Israel, or the vast majority of Israelis, don't want to rule Gaza. We want to go in, we want to destroy Hamas, and then remember, in 2005, Israel left Gaza. Gaza is not an occupied territory. Gaza was ruled by the Palestinian Authority, which has a peace accord with Israel. And in 2007, just 2 years after we left, the Hamas overthrew violently their own, brothers, the Palestinian Authority, and have created a monster. They've built the terror tunnels in Gaza, which is actually bigger than the subway system of New York. They've spent actually there's more international aid put into Gaza than the Marshall Plan that was put into Europe. So the future in Israel is to have a legitimate, which is internationally recognized, legitimate country with legitimate borders. I hope and I pray, and I am one of the people, like many of us, who have been fighting for a two-state solution. I think Hamas is the biggest enemy of the Palestinian people. Many of us, many of the people that have been slaughtered,
let me jump in
support
here,
that.
if I may.
That when this war is over, Richard, if I may just finish, I think when this war is over, we need to work diligently on peace. We need to work diligently on coexistence. I would love to see a Palestinian state, a peace-seeking Palestinian state. I believe that we do have the legitimacy. I think we have the support of President Biden, your Prime Minister Sunak, Germany and many others. Everybody supports, everybody recognizes that we need to eliminate Hamas. Nevertheless, Israel has a huge responsibility to continue and strive for peace. This is why we will be internationally accepted and very legitimate, because of who we are.
Okay. Just to explain to viewers who may hear me speaking over you, you and I are actually physically not that far away from each other. I'm in Dubai, and you're in Tel Aviv. But of course, the way the the satellites work, it's taking a little bit longer to get from one to the other and back again. On this question of Israel's ability, the central bank is going to have to provide huge amounts of liquidity. The market is already under pressure. The shekel has fallen. So a wartime economy, and for a country that had made its name as the startup nation, I guess it's very difficult now to move forward in that sense. Because for the foreseeable future, you're going to be dealing with this.
So, Israel has entered this crisis in one of the best situations ever. Israel debt to GDP ratio is only 60%, which is one of the lowest in the OECD. Israel has a huge economical surplus. Israel has a huge, over $200 billion of reserves. So Israel economy is very strong and very sound, and I believe can sustain this crisis from a macroeconomic. I think the government will need to be fiscally responsible. They will have to give up on some of their political agenda and make sure that all that deficit that we will definitely need will only be used to the war. I think the biggest engine of growth in Israel has been the high-tech industry. High-tech is a global business. It's not as affected. It's actually 17% of GDP, by far the largest and the most important industry in the country. And I believe the Israeli high-tech will continue to thrive. And it actually already is. day-to-day life is now, we are moving, Israelis are very resilient. We moved back to work quite quickly. Yes, we do have sirens. We have to go to shelter once in a while. I hope we don't have one as you interview me now. But we are continuing to invest. We're continuing to deliver. We just had a big sign on NASDAQ saying, we deliver no matter what.
All right. Can I ask you, finally, because when you and I spoke in Israel, we talked about the judicial reforms, which you were very forthright about against. You said in your recent blog, when this is over, we will find out what happened, make the necessary adjustments, and hold those responsible accountable. Well, obviously, you'll expect me to say you do hold the Prime Minister responsible, but more nuanced than that. Do you think the preoccupation with the judicial reforms meant that everybody simply took their eye off the security question?
I really don't think that the military failure is a direct result of the political judicial reform or the political dispute. I think that there was a conceptual policy wrong for many, many years, that we were trying to accommodate Hamas. We were trying to live with the Hamas. This is predating, this is probably 15-year-old. I think the military failure, the miserable, the incomprehensible military failure of, Israel is such a mighty country with an amazing superpower military, but we simply failed in staying the guard. All this has nothing to do with the judicial reform. However, I think the fact the country was divided, I think the fact the country was torn, I think the fact that some of our international investors started to lose faith in the country and in the institution was very dangerous. I do believe, and I'm very confident that after this, when this war is over, and when we win against Hamas, Israel will be rebuilt. I think we're more united than ever. I think the judicial reform is dead. I do think that the Israeli public will hold everybody, and I mean everybody, the military, the political leadership, who were responsible for this terrible failure. We will hold them accountable. And then Israel is a democracy, and we will let the electorate decide who the next leaders of this country are. But I'm sure the next leaders of this country will be rebuilding the country, will strengthen the institution, and Israel will continue to thrive.
Shlomo, I'm grateful for your time tonight. As always, thank you, sir, for joining us from Israel.